Chanukah, everyone! Tonight I want to try dyeing 6 skeins of yarn in one pot. I'm hoping to achieve a consistent, semi-solid, maybe tonal colorway across the board. I think that the most I've ever tried dyeing in one pot is 400 grams. And I just want to get a sense of, is my pot too crowded? Maybe could I even fit some more yarn in there? But we're going to give this a shot and see what happens. All 6 skeins that you see here are 75% Superwash Merino, 25% Nylon, platinum. It's a platinum base from Wool to Dye For. They aren't all the same because I've got 2 skeins of the DK weight platinum and 4 skeins of the sock weight. But they're the same fiber content from the same brand, so I am anticipating some similar results. Since this is part of our Chanukah special, all of these will be broken down to mini skeins in the end, and so that will also just sort of help us see just how balanced things are as we are doing this. Right now I am just adding some removable nylon zip ties as an additional tie and just a way to pick up and move around all the yarn. If you'd like to learn more about any of the materials I'm using today, you can find affiliate links in the video description. Today I am hoping to do sort of a take on the cool vat dyeing technique, where we will add the dye and the vinegar and the yarn to a cool bath, let it sit for, I don't know, 12 to 24 hours, and then heat set the color. This should allow the dye to absorb a lot more slowly than if we were to start heating it right away. Right here I have my 12-quart dedicated dye pot with 16 cups of water. Now this is not nearly enough water for our project today, but I want to pre-soak all 600 grams of yarn in our pot, and this should give me a sense of how much more of volume of water I might want, because then when we mix the dye and stuff, we know that we won't be adding too much water back in. But a good pre-soak today is quite important because the more evenly soaked our yarn is, the more even color coverage we can get. And I'm now going to go and add 16 more cups of water. We've now got 600 grams of yarn and 32 cups of water here in the pot. There's definitely space for the yarn to move, but not as much space as there could be. This is something that maybe we'd want to try in a 5-gallon bucket so we can have a lot more space for the yarn to move around, but we're gonna give this a shot and see what happens. There is more space for liquid in the pot, but we will be adding eventually some vinegar, and we are gonna be adding some dye, so I wanted to keep some space here for when we're ready to do that. So now I'm gonna let the yarn pre-soak for 30 minutes. I want to create a saturated color, and today we are going to use Dharma Forest green, which is a beautiful, beautiful deep green. There are some paler green flecks in here that I've seen in the past, but today I want a saturated color, so we're going to go for a 2% depth of shade, which means that I want 2 grams of dye per 100 grams of yarn. And since we have 600 grams of yarn, we are going to want, let's remove some, we are going to want 12 grams approximately of dye. And then I will slowly add hot tap water to our color so I can paste up the dye. I do want the dye to be fairly evenly mixed because we're trying to get consistent color across 6 skeins in a not mega crowded but reasonably crowded environment. But I'm going to slowly mix this up, adding more and more water until we have all the dye dissolved in a couple of cups worth of water. I have all the dye dissolved in a little under 2 cups of water. If I were concerned and I needed to do this project in 2 batches, I would mix up a lot more dye than I needed. So if I was going to do 12 skeins, then I would mix up double the amount of dye, 24 grams, dissolve it in more water, and then split that in half, because that would give me a better shot of having even color between the two batches. But in today's case, we know that I had 11.9 grams of dye, and so the total volume isn't super important because eventually all this dye will bind to our yarn. Okay, I am going to remove our pre-soaked yarn, and there's a lot of water in here. I'm trying to squeeze it out because if I have, actually I'm going to set it aside and I'm going to do it like a couple at a time. The less water is in our yarn to start out with means the more dye it can soak up and give us slightly more even coverage. So I'm going to go through with each of these skeins and sort of squeeze out this excess water. I mean, I could put it through my spin dryer, but I don't think that that amount is necessary. We're just going to do our best. Now I am going to pour in the dye that we mixed up and use this water to rinse out the container. The nice thing is that we aren't seeing any residue there, but I am going to go sort of grab some more water to rinse this out. And now I want to stir things up. The dye was well dissolved, so my concern is not about that, but yeah, we just want to have it nice and stirred up. Again, like, I honestly don't mind if there's some speckles. This is more just to see if we can do this in one of my pots or if I would need to go get a 5-gallon bucket to do something like this. Proof of concept. It definitely would have been smarter for me to divide things in half and then do 2 separate batches. And honestly, that's something that I would like to do at some point. But now I've got all 6 skeins, and you can see on the reflection, and I am sort of dipping this all together into our dye. So that way I can move things around. Some of the color, might start striking, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as fast as if this were hot and if we had vinegar in here. And I'm trying to be careful to not make a huge mess, and I did drop one of our friends. So raise it up, sort of move things down, move around the ties. But right now it feels like everything is fairly even. And so I'm going to go ahead and let this sit for, I'm going to let this sit in here for half an hour before I add some vinegar, just to give time for some of this dye to soak in all around. This color that we can see right here is so pretty. And there is a ton of dye left in here. Because again, we have no acid yet. Now, I could remove all the yarn, set it aside to add the acid, and then add it back. But I don't think things are going to go so fast. So I'm going to add acid, and then we will move the yarn to stir things up. But I'm going to go ahead and add 1, 2. So that's a half a cup total of white vinegar, which is equivalent to about 8 tablespoons. And I'm grabbing all of these zip ties again, so that way I can lift the yarn up, give it a bit of a stir, lower it down, and we will repeat this a couple times to just mix everything up and try really hard to not splatter this dye all around. Since the yarn is superwash at this point, with the addition of acid, the colors will start to slowly strike and bind, and hopefully give us a beautiful semi-solid tonal kind of yarn. But if this pot were warm, we would see those colors striking immediately. So that would give us more variation than what I'm honestly going for today. The surface I'm working on is protected with a shower curtain, so that way any splatters I can easily wipe up. But that actually was not as bad as I thought. So I'm now going to go ahead and let this sit for a couple of hours. Again, I expect that the color will start absorbing, but it will be pretty slow overall. And you can come and stir and move, but you know, this is sort of where we are color-wise at the moment. There is a lot of liquid in here, and so I would like to add more vinegar, but we're gonna do that slowly. So let's wait 2 hours and then we'll add some more vinegar. You might be wondering why I don't just go and heat this up right now. And I definitely could do that. But this is sort of a small test for getting that 5-gallon bucket, maybe doing 10 skeins of yarn all at a time, all in one sort of vat to create sort of one dye lot. And once I introduce the heat, then the color absorption won't necessarily be quite as even as what I'm hoping we will achieve here. Not to mention that if I did want to go and say dye, you know, 20, 100 skeins of yarn in one day, I don't have enough, I only have one of these pots. I don't have enough pot space to go and do all that on the stovetop, but I could set up multiple cool vats and then steam set in a dedicated dye microwave like Joe Cole does, or then heat it up later. So I guess what I'm doing is sort of something a little in between. And if it were warmer outside, like the forecast had predicted, and we didn't have this cloudy, hazy day, then I would have brought this all outside to do some solar dyeing to slowly heat in the sun. But alas, it's a dreary day, so I'm just gonna leave it inside. It's only been an hour and a half, and it's about 12:30 p.m. I just moved this outside because it finally started warming up. Some of the color has absorbed, but the water is still basically completely cool in here. It hasn't warmed up. My house is set to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's at least 10 to 15 degrees warmer outside. So why not take advantage of some of that natural heat? At this point, I'm going to add more vinegar. I'm going to add 1, 2, so it's about 3/4 of a cup, or I guess about 180 milliliters of white vinegar. So I think that brings us to about 1 1/4 cups total. And lifting it up outside, I can see some tonal variation in here already. Ooh. And a lot of color has definitely absorbed. But what we're doing now is carefully just sort of mixing everything up. And yeah, it should warm up out here, and that little bit of heat should help us sort of get this nice, beautiful green that we want. And I'm just using my hands. You could use tongs or something to move this around. It's fairly hazy out, so the sun isn't quite as direct as it's been in some of our other solar dyeing projects, but I think that even with the 7 hours of daylight we have left, we could get some good warmth. And we have plenty of acid in here now. So I am going to cover this up and keep an eye on it and move it into the sun if the sun comes out more. I mean, right now the sun should be right where I am, but yeah, I am really excited and I'm really liking this green color. I brought the yarn inside after about 6 hours total outside, and it wasn't hot, but it was definitely warm. And well, that's looking pretty clear. Let's pick up the yarn and see. I still plan to heat set it, but I'm curious. Oh yeah, that is almost completely clear. That's awesome. And again, this whole technique isn't completely necessary because after like letting it sit for a while, I could have just come in and heat it all together. But we have two choices at this stage. Since I do want to heat set it further, we could take the yarn, put it in a steamer basket and steam set it, or we can just turn on the stove here and heat this up and heat it immersion style for a little bit. I'm opting to just heat everything up because I'm already in water and vinegar and it just seems like the easiest thing right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and heat this pot up and I guess heat it for 20 minutes or so. It took almost 30 minutes for this pot to heat up, but we are now at a low boil, and I will heat for 15 minutes before we turn off the heat. It's been 15 minutes. I am going to turn off the heat, remove the lid, and we are going to remove all of the yarn so it can cool. We could leave everything here in the pot, but it's also not completely necessary because this has had plenty of time to set. Okay, and the last skein. There is a little bit of a yellowish color in the pot that was not there before we started heating. Presumably that would absorb to the yarn if I were to leave the yarn in the pot to cool. I have all the yarn sitting in this aluminum pan. We're gonna let it cool completely before we go wash it. And you can see just how steamy it is. It'll have some additional heat while we wait. But I'm liking the coverage we got here. I'm really excited, guys. Let's wash half of our deep green yarn. I love this color. It is so saturated. It is a beautiful, almost, well, it's bluer than an evergreen. It's like a spruce deep green. And this color is staying in our yarn. Wahoo! I am really excited to turn these full skeins into mini skeins. I mean, it's a lovely color, so I'm also a little sad to do it. But that'll really give a good sense of, it'll help you see the consistency of the color. And sometimes when you have a semi-solid that is so potentially so close to a solid, then once you reskein it, then you can see some of those differences more than you might in the full skein. But the color is so pigmented, it's hard for me to say if we are in like solid territory or what. Anyway, I am going to keep washing this. I'm going to rinse out all the soap, put this through the spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and then I'll do the same thing for the other three skeins. This yarn turned out beautiful. There is no question that these are tonal. It's really hard. I think it's really hard to see, but there are some darker patches and brighter patches in here, and that's something you can sort of see on all of the skeins. Like some of it is like a shadow, but some of it is legit the different coloration of the yarn itself. I think if I were to go and reskein all of these, and I guess technically I'm going to be going and reskeining all of them, and I'll insert some pictures in here of them as mini skeins, but if I were to go and reskein all of these, then it might be a little easier to see that tonal variation because you would see almost something that looks sort of stripy, very subtly maybe in the skein. Or else it would just look like some dimension because the colors are so close. I think if I had a bigger volume of water, and so if I had gotten those 5-gallon buckets, or if I got a larger just plastic tub, and so they could really move freely within there, we could have gotten something that is even more solid. But I don't see any white patches from going through this. The coverage is amazing. And I think that this could work really well for dyeing like a sweater's worth of yarn. Again, I might go for a larger bucket, and then instead of full-on immersion setting at the end like I did here, I would probably steam in a steamer basket, crossing my fingers that the issues that I had in that one Dye Pot PS episode did not occur again. But yeah, I think that there is a great level of consistency throughout these skeins. I'm not sure if it's just me, but there does feel like there is a tiny subtle difference between the 2 DK skeins and the 4 fingering weight skeins, just in terms of the amount of saturation. It could be about where it was placed, could be something about the DK platinum sock versus the fingering, or the DK platinum yarn versus the fingering weight platinum yarn, but overall the consistency within each size is great. That being said, if I were to knit a sweater with this yarn or any kind of bigger garment, I would want to treat any hand-dyed yarn like it might not be the same dye lot and alternate skeins every couple of rounds, just so that way you don't end up with a section of the sweater that just feels very different color-wise. It could also be worth winding everything into cakes and then comparing the cakes to one another, so that way you can have things mixed up in a way that feels great. But I do think that this technique has some merit, and I think that it would be a good way to start off dyeing a lot of skeins. And so I really would like to thank Jo Cole for sharing this technique. The Cool Vat, I think it's something that I definitely want to explore a lot more in the future. Reskeined, I think it's really, really tough to say how tonal this is, because I'm not seeing any micro striping right here. I do believe that there might be some depth and dimension once you knit with it, but it is so close to possibly the truest solid I have ever created. If you received one of the Chanukah samplers and knit with this colorway, I would love to hear what kind of dimension you saw within the section where you used this color. So there you have it, everyone. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you're subscribed, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. During this week of Chanukah, I am releasing a brand new video every night, and you really don't want to miss a thing. The Chanukah videos will be coming out at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and there's even a whole playlist, so that way you can go back and watch everything or see what you missed. If you enjoy these videos and want to help support the content that we're creating, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. I offer patrons early access to new content, behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, advance notice of shop restocks, which includes advance notice on things like the Chanukah sampler or the summer miniskeins samplers, and more. And so there's a lot of fun perks, and you should go and check it out. There will be a link both in the video description and iCard. As I am filming this video, I am not sure where it's going to end up within the Chanukah lineup, but I would like to wish everyone a very happy Chanukah, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. There's a lot going on this week holiday-wise, and so I hope if you're celebrating anything that your celebrations go great. Thank you so much for watching.